Welcome to another session of P5Live Sessions. Let's jump right in. What are we going to get into today? I thought it might be fun to explore sliders. Why? Because this is something I just taught my class today, using just the GUI elements to change our code. These little range sliders that we're used to. Let's create one and just check out what they can do. I'm going to create one that goes from 0 to 100, have it start out at 50, and position it somewhere in the center of the page so we can see this thing. All right, that is a slider. Let's have a background that's middle gray so we can really see the thing. Yeah, so this is just a plain old slider. It's super cool that you can use it to adjust your code all the time. Slider dot value. Maybe I should let the thing go up to 255, and then I can use that thing to adjust the background. So you can super easily make tools in P5, but I think it might be fun just to explore sliders for sliders' sake and see what can we do with them, and then maybe eventually add them up to become some kind of interesting controller of actual visuals. But first, just sort of messing around. So I'm going to make a bunch of sliders with an S. Actually, I think I'll call it S for sliders, so I don't have to type a whole lot. And turn all of this stuff off so far. Turn this off. Let's go back to middle gray. And I'm going to push a whole bunch in. So I'm going to have them all, I think, go from, 0 to 100, just a kind of default, and this should actually be in a loop. Maybe I'll start out with the code bigger until I need more space. So I'm going to create, let's start out with 20 of these things. And I'm going to throw a whole bunch of sliders in there. So now we have these sliders themselves. And I should be able to say S and talk to it S dot length -1. Should hopefully reach the next one, the one that it just created. And I want to send the things down the page. So I'm going to put them, let's start off with them in the middle and map these things out. Maybe instead of using 20, I'm going to use a loop count. So I got, I just called it LC. And so it'll be LC -1, and these should go from like height times 0.1 to height times 0.9. And let's see if this works. All right, we have a bunch of sliders. Yeah, these are fun. They're not hooked up to anything, but they're a super cool element. So let's give them maybe a random value. They should have a random 100 when they initialize. So every time I run it, I actually see different values on them. They could have a different size. I think I'm going to let this be a better variable to talk to. Let temp, let's call it TS for temp slider, be this temp slider. So I can just talk to this thing a couple times in the code. I'm going to say TS dot size 400, so they're 400 wide, or it could be fun that these things are the width, and then I should actually start them back way to the left, like at 5, and they should be width -10, maybe 15. Yeah, that's kind of fun. We can make visuals with sliders. Maybe this thing should go a little further to the spreading the whole page from the top to the bottom. Actually, maybe it's simply 0 is perfect for these things. What is 0? That's pretty good. Yeah, we'll use 1% of the height. And maybe we need more of them. What about 50? I have no idea how many of these things it can handle. I'm curious. They sort of stop looking like sliders at a certain point. But actually, let's let these things be like half the width. And maybe look into animating them in the draw. Maybe it's interesting actually to let their size grow. Let me do like the least they're 100 plus I times 50. Too much. I times 30. Maybe I need a map. Or simply map them from the beginning for their size. From I to LC minus 1, and I want them to go from 100 to with minus 10, minus 15. Starts to look like some kind of pyramid. Yeah, it might be interesting to use them to control the other ones. But I think first I just want to see if I can get these things animating on their own. So I think I'll loop through them all. I guess I started off with a super short variable, so now I have to go a longer variable to use this thing to loop through them. Of S's. Each SL is actually a slider. Maybe I should change my name and give them a slightly better name. Maybe sliders, 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 sliders. And then I can talk to a slider of sliders. Hopefully that's not confusing. SL.value. So then you get to mess with the value, and it could be like random from to 100. Yep, so that's going to be all chaotic. Or I do something like a noise times 100. And this could be frame count times 0.1 or 0.1. It doesn't like this. Noise, is it because it should be floored? And it's like maybe too many levels of precision, I could imagine. Yeah, so they're all connected to each other, having the same value. It still doesn't seem to like this for some reason. Not sure what you're complaining about. Noise. I think I just had one too many parentheses. No, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I had one too many parentheses. Maybe I don't need to floor it. All right, cool. And then I should use something like a I in there. So let me say C for counting, C++, C times 0.1 plus this frame count. Then we start to get some cool waves going through our sliders. This is going to be all about user experience. And I wonder if I can control them still, or they're totally on their own. I think I'd have to say, like, if my mouse is not there, then it does that thing. Could be interesting. If mouse Y, maybe the distance. No, it needs to be like, Nah, I don't know. I don't really care if my mouse can adjust them or not. Although it might be interesting to use the first one or two to actually control some of these parameters, like how wide should these things be? Should it be also all the way across the width? Should it be like this pyramid? I guess like this, I can't skip any of them, so maybe such a loop is not the best idea. Maybe instead I should do a normal for loop and do a I is going to be 0, I is less than SLS.length, I plus plus. Then I don't need a counter anymore. And then I have to talk to SLS I. And it stopped working because that needs to be an I. There we go. Yeah, so then I could start counting actually from number 1. And then the first one is not doing anything, and that could be used to manipulate them all. So I could say something like, maybe I use that first one to set there with dot size is SLS 0 dot value. This will be interesting. Okay, so then that thing is kind of like stuck as small or big. So maybe the very first one needs to be really big. Or maybe I just make them all width. I don't need to do that fancy thing. ts.size is width minus 10. All right, so this very first one, that's why, because the value, no, maybe I want to undo that. The value only goes up to 100, so this actually should be mapped and say that value comes in. It goes from 0 to 100. I want you to go 0 to width minus 5. There we go. And then I can control the sliders. This is super useful. Maybe before I go too much further, giving functionality each of them, it might be nice to have more of these things instead of just a going down row. Maybe you should have a couple of columns of these things. So I'll disable that change that I was doing. It's nice just having this value. Let's let all of them do the wave. So they're all doing the wave. Let's put them back at just a normal size. Actually, let them be their default size. And let's loop this thing a second time to put them either in, to put a couple rows of these things. So I'm going to surround this by another loop. I'm not quite sure how many this is like. I should have actually called this loop ly for maybe looping on the y-axis. The y, and then I'll do another one for looping on the x-axis. I think we want like 10 of them. Space that out a little bit. So now there is a whole bunch sitting on top of each other, and now we just need to space them out. So I need to space out the x's, which are based on j, lx, and they need to go from width to width. And plop them out. There we go. I think we have way too many. We don't need 10 of these things. I can only fit like 8. Or 7. Or 6. No, it's about the spacing is off. So we don't want so much. We want to do like width minus however big these things are, which is something like 150. All right. Dancing sliders. And now it would be interesting to, maybe somehow adjust the sliders based on the interaction with my mouse. I'm going to let these things get further down. I think 1% was pretty good. 6, 7. It depends on how big they are, but there, that's filling up the page pretty well. I could maybe even get away with a 9th row, a 10th row. Okay, now let's keep, whoa, way too many row. Uh-oh. Ha. we're going to have to quickly close and reopen this because I just caused a bug. I'll bring this window back so you can see what's going on here. This is something in P5Live that if you ever screw up your code like I just did, I accidentally created 189 loops. You can put hashtag bug and then it pauses the sketch. It just loads a new sketch and gives you a chance to update and fix your thing. Hit save and then it reloads what you had. Soon it will be a loop protection so that you can't make infinite loops unless you really want to and kill the machine. Okay, so right now they're doing their cool, like, noisy run. Let's let them be somehow interactive based on my mouse. So I'm going to do the same thing, SLS. Set their value to maybe be distance. I'm kind of curious about their X and Y. I don't know if this by default knows what their X and Y are. That's probably not such a good thing. But it would be anyways my mouse X, my mouse Y, and maybe SLS. I wonder if they know where they are. That would be interesting. If I say, let me do it in the draw. If I go print SLS, the very first one, dot position. Whoa, I get this big old crazy thing. Or does it know where its X is? Aha, 14. Cool. Its Y? Awesome. I think that's its size. Great. Okay, so I'll create a temporary thing. I'll call it let slider equal SLSI, so I stop having to use square brackets. I can update this guy, this one, and now get its X and its SL.Y. And now it's somehow connected to my mouse coming near it. But for some reason, all these other ones, it seems like, right, because they can only go up to 100. So I need to map this thing and say, map this distance, which is going to be from like 0, because I'm right on it, up to maybe width divided by 2. No, width is, I guess, as far away as I could be from it. 0 to 100. That might not be right, but it's in the right direction. Maybe it's divided by 2. Or it's the exact opposite, actually. Maybe I want it to be 100 down to 0 if I'm not near it. Nope, but it is interesting. Yeah, so that's like if I am far away from it, so it is 0. It's probably a problem just because of how sliders work, that they go forward and back. Unless, I don't know, there's probably a clever way to I guess the problem is I don't get like a negative value from the center. Maybe I should simply set it from not where they are, but from, or maybe where they are sitting. I don't know. Let's set it from the center and see what happens. That won't use my mouse anymore. Okay, not so exciting. Let's try something else. SL.value. It's got to be something up to 100. Sine of I coming in times 100. Maybe the absolute value, so it's only a positive number. Times 100 is right. It's about this value. How fast this thing loops. 0.5, 0.4, 0.3, We're making some slider art, not yet drawing anything to the canvas. We don't really even need a canvas other than the width that we are using. I remember there was some really nice work done on the interwebs a long time ago from Alex Shulgin, if I'm saying that name right, I hope so, who used to teach a JavaScript class, browser hacks, with all kinds of really cool pop-up, weird slider, HTML art. Okay, this thing slowed way down. Maybe it's interesting to give larger values until patterns appear. And then it's nice once you find one of these patterns, actually I'll stick with 6, then I could introduce a frame count to push this thing even more. So then I could say frame count times 0.1 plus. Maybe this needs to be inside the sign actually, that's why. There we go. Surprisingly, the computer is not complaining too much. I only hear the fan a little bit. Let me go back to 8. Move, sliders, move. Yeah, it could be interesting to actually hook up the sliders to different things happening in the sketch. And then that value that's mapped to that, you kind of see what's happening and it actually is affecting something in the background. This is adjusting the actual slider. Maybe it's interesting to adjust their position as well. Let's make not quite as many of them, 20, 30. I'm going to slow it down a bit and say 05, 02. All right. At the right position, we can probably create some nice DNA helix patterns out of the sliders. Yeah, what if I leave their position alone for a second? So this was kind of my favorite. I'm going to put that down at the bottom and see what I can do with the position. So its normal position is sl.x, is where it's supposed to be. So it's doing it right and staying there. If I said plus random 10, whoa, then they walk off the page. That's interesting. I guess, true. It's like I'm telling the position to grow. So I need to refresh to bring it back. Maybe I need a -1 to 1, and then they'll have like some wiggle room. They start out on a nice grid and slowly wander away. Could be nice if when we used forms and such, or Photoshop, that the tools just kind of slowly wandered away. Like, why does everything snap and sit perfectly still? Maybe the program should slowly fritz out and wander off. And then you try to set the color and it's just kind of now over to the left of the page. You have to go find it. So 3, 3, I'll give it a chance to catch up and go back to where it was supposed to be. 3, let these things slowly move. Then we could put the value back on so that they're both moving around and sliding back and forth. Let's try another kind of movement for the sliders. Let's say sl.value is frame count modulo 100. So that will send them all up to 100 and reset. And they need to have sort of unique numbers. So I need to use I in there somewhere. Like I times 5 plus. Or 0.5, so they're just like, ooh, there we go. Maybe it's nice to turn off the ripple and see what this thing looks like back at the start how it's supposed to be. Slider animations. I think I should start cloning a couple of these. Maybe it's nice to build a little website out of it later. Let me give this a proper name. And I'll clone to keep working from this point. Yes, how fast does that thing go? It depends on this value here. So times 10, way fast. Times 5, or 0.5. The bummer is I can't adjust them while it's doing its own thing. It kind of takes over. Let them wobble around. So maybe some of these things should have absolutely no change. And then use a couple of the sliders to make these things happen. To give kind of a meta animation, use one or two of the sliders to adjust them. Or a random one. Maybe it's like randomly in there having this functionality. Could be interesting. I could hook up the background to one of these to see what that does. It ends up just kind of fading from 0 to 100. That's not so exciting. Let's go back to 128. And maybe instead of 30, actually let's see what the computer can handle. Up to 60 of these things, 70 of these things. 80 sliders. With 10 across or 9 across. Yeah, unfortunately, if I take a screenshot with P5Live, I think I just get a blank background because unfortunately all of this stuff sits on top of the canvas. It's like hanging out on the DOM. So I should look into capturing somehow the whole interface, everything you see. It would be fun to make a feedback of the code that we actually have here to get to play with that. But let's make fewer of these things. Make them wider. Yeah, and it'd be interesting to attach them to different functionality of different things. So maybe it's a question how many of these things. Maybe I say I only want vertically 20 of them or so. And then not send them so far down. Let's send them just to like 20% of the way down. Maybe 10 is enough. And actually use these things for something. What do I want to use them for? I should probably create an object for each one that I have and maybe throw it into that object and have that object run around and do something. Or I totally stay with sliders and don't actually attach them to anything but themselves. What I haven't done is any CSS styling to the sliders. I forget how you do this. Web kit appearance is the default of what these things look like. when I turn that off, it sort of gets rid of the bar like we've seen it. It changes the styling a little bit. Now we end up getting something different. If I turn that back on, that's the default. It's nice seeing the default, although that's kind of like a Chrome default. Let me throw a different value in here. I can hear the fan kicking on a little bit. It's not so excited about these changes. The 80 might be a bit much. Turning into triangle waves. I think this needs to go back down a bit, take up the whole page. Sine wave, the rolling wave, the size. Whoa, whoa, freaking out. Interesting. Okay, maybe because I have so many more, now I can see. Okay, I just see the distance much different when there's way more there. Or maybe it was a glitch that wasn't supposed to be there. Strange, with 80, yeah, I think it was some kind of a glitch. A noisy wave. What else can I do with sliders? Maybe it'd be interesting to interlace them. Maybe I leave there with something like this. Let me duplicate this and leave it alone and only set its size to this value. Up to 200, 300. That's kind of interesting, doing the same thing, but instead of moving the value, it's actually changing the width of the slider and keeping the value where it was, so then they're all still interactive. I think it's not such a fan of changing its size. That must be a little hard for the browser. Let's take fewer of them. There we go, 40 seems to be a bit better. I guess the nice thing, yeah, the changing the size of them is a bit better because then I can still use them. With the value changing, they're stuck. So maybe if I set their position, it was at random. What if they were all at 50%? Then that's like the middle, they're all at halfway in. And then I could start to use some of the sliders because I wanted to use them, and when you set their value, you can't touch them. So now I could use the first one to actually be, to use it for something. So maybe I use it for how many of these things I go through. How many of these lengths do I have? I think I could do something like SLS 0.value modulo. Oh, and did I break it? Modulo. I broke it. It was not a fan of that bug. Let me fix that. And I want to say modulo, so it can't get too big. Because it's not just value, it's got to be this guy. Let's see if that works. Yep. except then it's only talking to some of them. So actually this value needs to be as many of these things as there's going to be. So the very first one needs to go out further. So actually I should probably do some math here and say let, this should actually be like its own loop count is flooring a map of SLS0 dot value from 0 to 100 to 0 to SLS dot length. Let's plug that in. And it's LC. There we go. Nope, did not work. Because we need parentheses, the value. There we go. Yay, so now that can grab all of them, or it freezes some of them. So that way you can control how many of them are wiggling. But then it just kind of looks like they're frozen, but I guess it gives you the ability to let them move and freeze them. All right, then I should do something with the second one. It's a question how many of these things should do different things. Maybe one of them controls the actual size that the things get to. So I could say their size instead of 300 is actually SLS1 dot value times 3, which would let it get up to 300, or times 4. And then that adjusts, whoa, oh, let's get it way too small. And then they're gone. So actually I should do it to all of them except itself. If I does not equal 1. So we'll do it to all of them except that one. And then maybe the speed should be controlled. So let me it won't let me add a curly bracket. Let me go full screen again. And control that thing. Okay, that's working. Let me set one for the speed. So where was this here was the frame count, how fast this thing moves. So maybe this is SLS2 dot value divided by 100, by 1,000. And then where's number 2? It's a little tricky to grab, but you are able to. And what else could I do? This one here is the sort of pattern that it's making. So this should also be a slider. SLS3 dot value. SLS3 down here. Divided by 100 as well. So they're just kind of moving. Where else do we need a value? And actually these should probably be, no, it'd be impossible. It'd be nice if they were randomly distributed in there, so you just had to find them. But when there's so many here, that probably would not happen. And when I lower the resolution down of this thing, It does make it easier to find the stuff. But then the resolution of the animation is smaller. Yeah, it would be interesting to make them all sort of relative to each other, so they're each kind of... I think it's actually nice when all of them are affected. So actually this first one is not so making so much sense that it disables which one we're looking at. Or just tell it at the beginning to be 100, and if you touch it, then... Oh, oops, actually just the very first one. They should probably all be random 100, and then just tell the very first one SLS0 has a value of 100, so that they're all affected. What if they rotate? What would that mean? I think it's a transform, rotate. Do we have to say degrees? We do. So that is a CSS transformation of the sliders. 40 degrees. At 10 degrees, let's put in a random degrees. I think I should be able to go like this and say, no, I can't interrupt it there. How would I do this? Maybe I need to feed it a variable. And get a random number in here, plus plus, floor random 100. Let's see if this works. Rot degrees, what's the problem? Rotate plus, floor. We need this one more. All right. Let's plug this in. Yay, now we have sliders twisting in all kinds of weird directions. Yeah, they're a little hard to use, but they are usable. Maybe the fact they move makes them a little hard to use. So that's about their size. If we turn this on, interesting, making something like pickup sticks out of these sliders. That can be kind of nice to just stack a bunch of sliders on each other. I'll go back to setting their values to random. What about this other one? Set their size again. Whoa, not happy with that. Giving them some wiggle. Yeah, so the rotation is interesting that that's a thing, that's possible. Maybe it's nice to actually have them kind of spin and do something like that. So I could say sine of I times 0.1 times 45 times 90. That could be interesting. I think we're just doing research for future sliders of future websites. It's kind of like, why make them all horizontal, stacked above each other? You could make them kind of twist and bend bend a couple times. I think the values need to change to see this stuff do something fun. Maybe they don't rotate so well, or they don't change their sliders so well while they're rotated. It'd be interesting if that slowed everything down. Yeah, this 0.2 is quite nice, and if it was 180, then it would go from like a horizontal one, working its way down to another horizontal one, flipping again. So maybe I need to go not so far down. Yeah, I should probably actually build something that, this is building something, but something that's connected to each one of them so that they feel like they serve a purpose. And maybe it's just like a pixel grid in the background that each one of these is connected to so that you could use the slider to adjust it. That might be enough. Because how many of these things do we have? 6 times 20. 180 of them. If I go at 10, what if it's a 10 by, ooh, that changed quite a bit. What if I just did a 10 by 10 to get 100 sliders? 100 sliders, 100 pixels can do some interesting combos with that. This is super fun, playing with the rotation of these things. This should probably be a live feature in the draw space so that you could actually adjust these things, because that gets pretty fun. And I think in order to play with it in a live setting, I just have to set the transformation, and it's tricky because it has to have this degrees here. So let's try playing with that down here. And this is actually known as SL. And it's using I, and the only thing we have to do is add a frame count in there. So if I go frame count plus, not there. This needs to be inside the sign. And then it needs to be slowed way down. There we go. Who needs lines when you have sliders? Yeah, this seems a little slow. Either I'm making it really slow or the computer. Oh no, I guess the computer can kind of handle it. It feels a little choppy. It's a question if I actually have to floor this number, or can it just be a, whoops. Can it just be a float? It can. Might not make a difference. Okay, but let's make some kind of pixel grid in 10 minutes to attach all of these things to. So I have 10 by 10 of these things. What are we going to do? We are going to have to make a quick class of like a rectangle or so. Let's call it a, we can't call it a box. Let's call it a slider pixel. And give it an X equals X, and this dot Y equals Y. We're going to feed it an X and a Y. And maybe it has this dot G for grayscale equals random 255 to start. And then I'm going to display these things and say display. Let's just draw a rectangle that is at this dot x, this dot y. Oh, we need to know how big it is. This dot s. This dot s equals s. Okay, let's build a bunch of these things. Slider pixels is a thing. Every time I push one of those, I'm going to push a slider pixel. New slider pixel. It's going to get the x, the y, and its size needs to be, I think, width divided by lx, maybe. And a slider pixel is going to be a slider pixel, and I should display it. So there are all the slider pixels, which still need a fill of this dot grayscale. There we go. The grid isn't quite right. And now each of these need to control each of those. So I need to say sp.value, no, sp.g equals sl.value. This is getting abstract. Hey, there we go. So this could be a very, very, very special kind of pixel art tool. You could go and make each pixel one at a time by these weird rotated sliders. Maybe we fix the rotation and make it either not as much or way more. That could be interesting to try and adjust each of them like so. Whoa, oh yeah, that was for how many of them were affected. That was interesting, that's still attached. This isn't easy, but it works. I could totally try to make a picture like this. Maybe every time you run it, the rotation is a bit different, so we get different patterns of how we have to play with each of those pixels. If I only make 5 of them across, and 5, we'll get these much bigger pixels. It's a bit easier to control. This is like the beginners learning how this thing works. And then for those who want to make a really intricate picture, we could do a 25 by 25. Ooh, that's not good. Too many. Yeah, I think this should be some random number. Random from 0.1 to 0.4. Maybe O. It stopped having some kind of math-like quality. Probably because each one was then totally random. That random needs to be generated just once at the top to say like let rot random equal this thing, so that they all get the same value. There we go. Then you start to get patterns again. I should fix the pixel distribution a bit so they fill out the whole page. I guess that just has to do with this guy not being allowed to go all the way to the edge. So technically if I said, hey, just be 10 away, there we go. I guess it depends on how big these things are. So it's like minus width divided by Lx. And it fits. Have to fix the right side or the left side a bit. That is that it should simply go probably from 0. And this should technically go from the very top. Yeah, what do we do with this thing? It's an abstract discovery of sliders. Maybe it'd be interesting to use it for some kind of a password, and you could, with a bunch of these, put them at just the right spot, and then it unlocks some of the fancy motion. Like this. Oh, that's interesting. We only have 4 minutes left. Now that this is using the value, since the pixels in the back are totally dependent on the value of these things. Oh, I actually have to fix it because they were... what happened? It disappeared. And now when I bring it back, now we can see interesting visualizations of all those changes to the sliders. I think the problem is they start out being random, and then I told the G to be the value, but the thing is it goes actually from not 100 but up to 250, so it should be times 2.5, I think. And then I think we can reach the full range of colors. So when it's that, then maybe it'll change colors and come back. No, it disappears. Damn, what's going on? It is this frame count modulo 100. No idea. It's freaking out at one point. Ooh, there's some kind of code breaker. Ah, maybe because it's taking too long to do the view. This is a new upcoming feature trying to make code breaking a thing so that you don't run into infinite loops, which it feels like we are, but I can say no protect, and then this thing should be allowed to keep running. It's probably getting slow. But I'm surprised it's like running out and then just quitting. Weird. Maybe it doesn't have to do with this. Something else is killing it. Damn, it looked like it was going to be fun. What about this one with the distance? Also a problem. SP display. Yeah, there must be something. These are okay when they go all the way across, all the way across. That's no problem. Maybe, I bet it maybe has to do with some of these affecting everyone except for this. So maybe what I need to do is say this needs to be more than 5, because the first 5 were doing some special things. I think that's what's going on. That very first one was killing everything. Yeah, there we go. Whoops. Because I forgot that very first one was limiting how many of the things actually get animated. So now I have a weather pattern generator. You can see there's a downward wind to the left. The positions is fun, getting them wiggling. This distance to them doesn't seem to do a whole lot. This value should be in here. And this is just like slowly wandering all the things around. Each time I rerun this, I get slightly different patterns. Let's go back to this one that sort of wanders down the page. If I change this to a lower number, we just get them slowly walking along the line. .5, kind of the whole thing is going to fade at once. Or we have this thing move very fast. Maybe not even very fast, just big gaps between them. Ah, 10 made a nice diagonal. Yep, this has been a P5Live session. Hope you enjoyed seeing sliders doing sliding. Times 10, make that thing go really fast. There we go. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. So this is the dramatic ending and segue into our intro. Thanks for watching. Now we're in the future. Be back next. We'll continue with another P5Live session next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Central Eastern European Time. See you then. Ciao.